SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.
Well, welcome back to the floor here at the Nasrec Center, of course, on the last day of the G20 Leaders Summit. Of course, that declaration, having it right back on the very first day. So lots of analysis now in terms of what these G20 leaders have come to, and certainly a lot of focus on if there's going to be anything that will come from this particular declaration. Without wasting time, I want to bring in John Kavulich, who's a senior research editor, Outcome Modeling Analysis. John, thank you so much indeed for joining us. We really do appreciate it. I think let me start there. I mean, for 48 hours, you've got the leaders of these nations gathered, deliberating on various global issues. Are these declarations useful?
The declarations have a shelf life of about 48 hours, and it's not just about South Africa. It's every country, because they're by consensus, and that by definition means that the weakest are going to be the one to prevail. And so they're useful, they're instructive, but they're not something that a week or 2 or 3 or a month from now people are really going to remember. What they more remember is what happened at the event, the optics, the visuals, the statements, and then also how the host country dealt with issues that were a surprise. And certainly President Ramaphosa has had a lot of surprises.
Yeah. And I mean, if you talk about the optics, in the run-up to this G20 Leader Summit, there was a lot of that. In fact, there had been lots of speculation about who might come and who might not come. In this particular instance, given that you had a declaration right on the first day, and you have a situation where now some have declared somewhat this summit a success on that basis, on the fact that President Ramaphosa was able to pull it off.
Absolutely, because a year ago, would he have ever expected that, well, President Trump elected, and then this just tsunami of attention by President Trump towards South Africa, none of it good, and most of it not based on any type of fact whatsoever, but because someone got in his ear. And the next thing you know, we're using the term white genocide. We're bringing white Afrikaners to the United States as refugees. It's like mind-boggling. And if you're President Ramaphosa or you're any government official here, but worse, if you're a citizen of South Africa, you're looking at that and going, what's wrong with these people? And so President Trump at first said, I'm not going. Then he said Vice President Vance is going. Then Vice President Vance said he's not going. Then President Trump said no one is going. So this G20, President Ramaphosa has hosted a precedent-setting event because we're not going to, one country didn't come, and we're in an unknown world as far as handing off from one country to another. So it's it's just full of surprises. But again, President Ramaphosa and the government has handled it well because they're dealing with the world's largest bully. President Trump is a master of bullying people and belittling people and insulting people, and he uses every social media tool to do it. You can't compete with him. And for President Ramaphosa, he's tried to act statesmanlike, played by the rules. That's all you can do because he's like a baby. Babies have a tantrum and then they go to sleep, and their attention goes somewhere else. And that's sort of what we need to wait for.
How do you think South Africa, not that we're in a position to dictate how that should be done, but of course, there's been a change in the manner in which that handover will take place. I mean, everyone is saying South Africa is well within its rights. If you have a handing over ceremony, it's the United States that said it did not want to come. We gave them that. We continued. You would want that handover ceremony. South Africa says, look, you've broken protocol. And essentially, you want somebody who is quite junior, if I may, for the president to hand that over to somebody junior. What should South Africa, I'd really like to get you on that. How should South Africa be handling this matter?
There is no precedent. So President Ramaphosa, you look in the G20 rule book or manual, there's nothing in there about one member saying that they're not going to participate at all. So that's like, well, how do we seat people? Do we leave an empty chair? What do we do? And then in terms of the handoff, there's no guidance for him other than precedent. And precedent is the head of state or the head of government there's always a ceremony. When we had it in New Delhi with Prime Minister Modi, and that's the last time that we had the declaration on the first day, was India. And ironically, what else happened in India? It was when the African Union became a permanent member of the G20 group. That's right. So sort of ironic, and here we are. But President Ramaphosa is doing the best he can. He is trying to say, Donald, Mr. President, you're into protocol, you're into optics, you're into performativeness. Well, this is sort of how then you need to do things. But right now, the best thing to do is let some time go by. We're at the end of the weekend. President Trump is now focusing on the Russia-Ukraine peace deal. There's a meeting in Geneva today with a bunch of representatives of the involved governments and the ones that want to be involved. Then we go into Thanksgiving in the U.S. So he's down at Mar-a-Lago with all of his friends in Florida. So there's going to be some time for this to get digested and then sort of figure it out. But President Ramaphosa's best position now is you don't force it. You've sent the diplomatic messages to the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria or Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. Just let it die down, let it calm. And you just hope because, like I said, you're dealing with the world's most effective bully, and you can't compete with him. So you just have to try to hope he has another target.
A little bit earlier on, you spoke about, what is not being spoken about here or what's happening behind the scenes, given the fact that there'd been another meeting that had been taking place, and that meeting would not have taken place if you didn't have some of these delegates that are in attendance here at the G20. Right.
The G20 in Bali sort of leads up to this, and that is things happen that are not expected, not planned. The world, politics doesn't wait. Well, at Bali, there was a missile that landed in Poland right after the Russia-Ukraine war began. President Biden then publicly said, hey, we're all here, let's get together, let's have a meeting to discuss how we're going to respond. And they came out with something, and it was consequential. We fast forward to this weekend, and what do we have? President Trump issuing this 28-point Russia-Ukraine peace proposal. Now, the timing was fantastic because the leaders who did show up, they are here. And yesterday, what did they do? They all said, let's sit down and have a meeting to discuss how we're going to respond. We've got our teams meeting today in Geneva. Let's use the opportunity. Without a G20, those heads of state and heads of government wouldn't have been physically together. So sometimes you can't plan for value. And in this case, this meeting happened. Those who chose to come were able to make something really important. And that doesn't demean in any way or lessen the importance of the goals and objectives that President Ramaphosa has put on for the last year. But that's something, the meeting, Russia-Ukraine, hopefully moving that ball and solving that war, that was really important.
John Kavulich, thank you very much indeed. We really do appreciate your time. We kept you waiting for a little bit, but thank you very much for your patience. We really do appreciate it. John Kavulich, who is a senior research editor, outcome modeling analysis, basically looking at analyzing, the G20, what comes out of the G20, whether it will be sustainable, whether any of those declarations are useful. That's the kind of research, essentially, that they do. We'll continue with our rolling coverage here from Nasrec, and certainly with today being the last day, a little bit busier, much busier here on the floor. I think we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue with our coverage.